Okay, so let's get started. So as a quick recap, what we're here today to talk about is GitFlow, a Git branching strategy, specifically around what it is, how it does, what it does, questions about perhaps targeting branches and when to target branches, and then maybe a little bit of a discussion as why we are using it in Chocolatey. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So I know David, you had some questions about it. So yeah, fire away and we'll start the discussion there.
Yeah, so I guess I'm most familiar with Github Flow. Being a simple person, that seems to click with me. But I know GitFlow is out there, but yeah, I've never quite really got it, I suppose, and just it seems like it's adding extra layers in the way of me getting something done.
Mm-hmm. So I think in pictures, David, right? So I'm gonna share my screen so you can see my whiteboard here. Yes.
Yes.
So let's get a baseline for where we are, right? So typically in a normal repository, you're working away, and each of these are commits, right? So you do a commit, and then you do some work, do a commit, right? Now, if we're talking specifically about Github Flow, then this would be your master branch or your main branch, depending on how it's named.
Yep.
And what you would do is you would cut a branch. So this would be your, let's just call it a feature A branch. Yes.
Yep.
You would do some work on that branch, you do some commits, you would get to a point, and then you would say, okay, this feature is amazing, right? It's ready to go, right? And then normally what you would do is you would do a PR. That's meant to say PR. You do a PR into the master or the main branch, and then depending on your preference, you would either do a merge commit or a fast forward merge commit, or a fast forward merge, so that you would end up with all of that work from the feature branch in the master or the main branch. Yes.
Yep.
So that is the standard GitHub flow, correct? So if you think about it, right, everything in GitFlow is quite similar to this. And I'll explain that because I know what you're going to say. It's like, it's not, because you've got all these other branches. Well, what are you talking about, Gary? You're being an idiot, right? But bear with me a little bit, okay? So if I go ahead and delete all of that, right? So let's get rid of where we were. And I'll draw essentially where we are with the Chocolatey Choco repository right now, okay? So in Chocolatey Choco, we have a master branch, and then we also have a develop branch, right? So let's just say that develops over here, it's got some history, and masters over here, it's got some history, right? Now, we, as part of our release process for Chocolatey Choco, we assign tags to the repository. So this would be the same if you are doing a GitHub flow or whether you're doing Git flow. But right now, we are tagged on the master branch at 110. Okay. So at some point in the history of this repository, there was a merge from develop into master to bring all the work from develop into master. But let's ignore that for right now. Okay. So let's imagine a scenario, and this is where we are today, that we've got a bunch of open PRs on the Chocolatey Choco repository. So someone done some work and they want to merge it into Chocolatey. Now, the target branch, whether that's the master branch or the develop branch, really comes down to what is that feature or what is that bug targeting? What is that feature? What version of Chocolatey is that version targeting, right? So let's imagine a scenario where you, David, wants to do a contribution into Chocolatey Choco, and you want it to go out in 120, the next minor release of Chocolatey. Or even worse, you've done some, not worse, that's a terrible word. That's a terrible word. Let's imagine that you want to make a change that is a breaking change, And we Chocolatey agree that this needs to go in. So this will go in out in the next 2.0 release of Chocolatey, right? So what you would do is you would do a GitHub flow, essentially, because you on your local branch, your fork, you would cut a branch over here that says feature A, right? You would do some work, you would do some commits, and then at some point you would say, well, I want to merge that into develop. Now you're targeting develop in that PR because you want that thing to go out in the 1.2 release of Chocolatey. And that's the next release based on what we're tagged at currently on the master branch. So we say, oh, David, that's amazing. We are going to merge that in. Where's my button gone? So we say, David, that's amazing. We're going to merge that in. So at that point, that feature is now destined for going out in the 1.2 release.
Yep.
Okay. And then let's say that Wency then does another, Wency then says, oh, I've got another thing that I want to go out in the 1.2 release. We agree as part of our process, we triage the issue, we assign it a milestone, et cetera, et cetera. Wency does some work and then targets a PR against the develop branch. Again, it's destined for the 1.2 release. And we say, well, Wency, that's amazing. Let's merge that in, right? So each of these things here, I hope you'll agree, is essentially GitHub Flow.
Yep.
Because the slight difference is that you're targeting the develop branch, but the work is exactly the same, right? So this is where it comes into, well, if it's just GitHub Flow, why have you got this thing over here that's the master branch? And the reason for that is because as we've been progressing down this path here, where we've got this feature, we've got this amazing addition to Chocolatey Choco that's in the develop branch, someone comes along and says, well, down here in the 1.1.0 release, there's a bug and we need to fix it right now. But if we were to use a standard GitHub flow, then we might not have released this feature that David's made yet. And we might not have released this thing over here because we've got other things in the wings that we want to also ship as the 1.2 release. But what we want to do is we want to do a 1.1.1 release, and we want to do a hotfix release.
Yep.
So what we do in that scenario is down here off a master is we'll create a hotfix 1.1.1 branch, right?
Yep.
And then once we've done that, I come along and I do some work. So I do some work here on a GitHub flow. I'm going to create a branch off of that hotfix branch. And then I'm going to merge that into my hotfix branch. We're going to do all the due diligence and testing and all that sort of stuff, right? And then at that point, I will merge that into my master branch. And at that point, that again gets tagged as 1.1.1. And then we haven't included all this stuff that Wency did over here or that you did over here, David, right? But we've been able to ship a bug fix that is a 1.1.1, right? But this 1.1.1 only lives in our master branch just now. And that's bad because we want to ensure that we don't have a regression when we ship 1.2.0 of Chocolatey.
Yeah.
So in addition to doing this merge here, which was the merge of the hotfix branch into the master branch, what we also do is we also merge master into develop.
Oh.
So that takes the 1.1.1 fix, the bug fix that was placed into the master branch, over into the develop branch. Yes? And then at that point, we carry on down this path. We accept some more feature branches. We accept more changes into it. And then at some point, we say, well, actually, we're ready. We're going to ship 1.2. So what we do at that point is we cut another branch this way. So all the branches previously, in terms of the work that you were doing here down in the feature branch and that Wency was doing down over here, They went to the right in the sense that you've got your own little feature branch. You do the work, and then we're going to merge it into the develop. Now over here, we're going to cut over here a new branch that is the release 1.2 branch, right? Now over here, we can then do some more work, QA, bug fixing, things that aren't quite working the way that we want them to for the release 1.2 release. Then we can say we're ready. So at this point, we'll merge over to master, which brings us up to date from here, and we'll tag that at 1.2. The benefit of that is that over here on the master branch, this is really getting quite busy now, but over here in the master branch, someone can then be doing GitHub Flow for more features that are destined for the 1.3 release. But over at this point, we've cut the release branch from the develop. We do all our QA, internal testing, remediation work, etc. And when we're ready, we do this. We do the merge to master. But then it's the same problem or the same issue in that down here, we said that we'd done some work on the 1.1 release that wasn't in develop. We're potentially in the same situation here, where we've done some QA work on the release branch that needs to go back into the develop branch. So once we do the tag over here, we again do a merge, for goodness sake, we do a merge back to the develop branch. And that closes off the 1.2.0 release. So there's a little bit of added overhead in terms of merging this way and that. But fundamentally and conceptually, the thing about GitFlow is you want to be in a position where we can do a 1.1.1 hotfix release immediately without having to potentially also release things that aren't quite ready for production. Right. But individually, when you're doing the work, when you're doing your feature down here, or where Wency's doing his feature, or where someone else is doing his feature, that is in its little bit, it's just GitHub Flow. But the question you need to ask prior to doing the work is, what release is this going out on? That's the question. So is it a hotfix? At which point there would be some amount of internal process to create that hotfix branch for you so that you could target that hotfix branch. Or if it's just going out in the next release of Chocolatey, then you would target the develop branch. But like I say, by progressing the develop branch, you're potentially adding things to the develop branch that aren't ready for prime time. They haven't been tested. They haven't been QA'd to the point that you're happy with them. And then that bug fix comes in and you want to say, well, we need to ship that immediately because it's prime example would be, oh, there's a CVE on 7-zip. We would want to ship that immediately. So we would probably ship that as a 1.1.1. That's not a bug in our system, but it is a security release that we would want on one of our dependencies. We will want to ship that as soon as possible. But if our develop branch has currently got a couple of merge PRs from the cake is a lie or from someone else on the team that hasn't been tested, it has been merged but hasn't been tested, we can't ship that develop branch yet. But the master branch we know is good because it's got the latest tag, the 1.1.0, right?
Yep.
So there was a lot of words there, but did that make sense in terms of what it does and how you put it together?
So what happens to the hotfix or the release branch once you've merged? Do you delete them or do they just hang around?
That's a good question. So let me maybe get a new thing here. How do I get a new tab? So this is getting really busy. How do I create a new thing? There we go. Right. Oh, I don't want the app. I don't want the pro app. Oh, that's asking for a layer. That's why. Hold on. I'll get there yet. Oh, that's the delete button. No, that's not what I want you there. Oh, seriously, how do I? You would think I would know how to use this app, but I don't. There? No? Is it here? Here, right, fine, we're here, right. Sorry about that. So the question was, so we're down here at 1.1.0. This is our master branch.
Mm.
We cut over a new hotfix 1.1.1 branch. We do some work. And then what I said was, well, we'll merge that to master to get to a 1.1.1.
Yep.
But we also want to cut that over to our develop branch to bring that up to date. So we do that merge, and then yes, that branch disappears.
Well, just on the diagram there, are you merging from the hotfix branch or from master back to develop?
See, oh, that's a great question there. That's a very good question. Right. It's also been a bone of contention.
Okay.
Now, if you follow the original GitFlow definition, then the person that created it, that was a username called NVIE. So if you Google him and GitFlow, in his description, in his original blog post description, he had the merge from the hotfix branch to the develop, and then the hotfix got deleted.
Right.
Right. But then some people came along and said, well, that's a terrible idea, right? Because some of the built-in functionality within Git gets lost because you haven't got a linear progression of the history of the master repository compared to the develop. Because there's been that there's been a divergence in the graph, right? So what they came along and said, well, a better version of GitFlow would be, here's your master branch, here's your hotfix branch, you do your work, you merge that to master, and then over here you've got your develop branch. This is develop. A better way to do GitFlow would be to merge the master into develop.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
In my head, excuse me, in my head, this one makes more sense. That's just me, right? But what we're following in Chocolatey Choco now is this one. So we merge master to develop once the work has been completed. And that goes for both a release branch. So because you would merge a release branch into master when it's finished, you'd merge a hotfix branch into master when it's finished. And then to finish all that off, you merge master back to develop. Now, potentially, there are merge conflicts because the work that you've done in the release branch or the work that you've done in the hotfix branch might interfere or conflict with some of the work that's progressing on the develop branch. That's entirely fine, though, because when you do that merge, you resolve that conflicts, and then you're still at develop at that point. You've got the opportunity to fix stuff and to make sure that for the next release, everything is up to date and everything is working. But the what's gone out is what's been tested and what's ready to go. So master going into develop, that merge conflict is kind of expected. You kind of there are going to be issues there, but you resolve them in develop before you then do another ship, because what you've shipped is what's been tested and has been ready to go. So there's a little bit of overhead, and I agree, because we're now talking about a master branch. We're talking about a develop branch. We're talking about one or many hotfix branches. We're talking about one or many release branches. But this one and this one only come into play when you're ready to do a release, because you've identified a bug and you want to ship it, or you're at a point where you're doing a release. That's the only time that those branches come into play. The ones that you're working with day to day is typically that one. Because typically the work that you're working on is progressing the next release, which is targeting the develop branch. So that's why on Chocolatey Choco, we set the develop branch as the default branch on GitHub. So when you raise a PR or when someone else in the community raises a PR, it's automatically targeting develop.
Yeah.
The only reason that we would change that is we then have a conversation. Oh, David, you see that thing you raised? That's a bug that we need to fix right now. So then we would come in and we would create the hotfix branch, because you as a contributor can't create that branch on the main repository.
Yeah.
And then we would retarget your PR to the hotfix branch, ready to be shipped immediately, rather than just going into develop to then go out in the next release.
Hmm. So it sounds like this is better for software it's not being continuously released, but that you're having releases at certain points in time, I suppose.
Because if we go back to, and that's where we're going to come to next. If we come here and we use the GitHub Flow, and you've got a single master branch, you do some work, and then you come along, you do a feature, it gets accepted, you merge that into here. Now, normally, that would be some sort of continuous deployment process. So it's immediately going out, whether that's getting shipped as a NuGet package, whether that's shipped to a website that's hosted somewhere. That would be a true continuous deployment scenario where you're immediately shipping that thing. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But in our scenario, we're building up work. We're collecting work that we don't want to immediately ship. So by doing that work on the develop branch, we've got the opportunity to run that through some internal testing processes. We were able to potentially give that out as a beta package for folks to play with, rather than immediately shipping it and then having issues immediately as soon as that thing gets merged there. Now, we're not going to apply GitFlow to all of our repositories because that doesn't make sense.
Yep.
But we are, where we've got something like a Chocolatey Choco, or we've got the Chocolatey license extension, or potentially where we've got something like Boxstarter, which you've been contributing to. Absolutely, in my head, all of those make sense to have a GitFlow strategy or a GitFlow branching strategy, because let's say Manfred gets to a point where he's ready to ship version 3. Great. Then I think he immediately wants to start breaking stuff, and that's fine. He would do that on the develop branch. But then someone using Boxstarter finds a bug on version 3 that we want to fix. But over here in the develop branch, Manfred broken a bunch of stuff because he wants to rip out the innards of Boxstarter and change how it works.
Yeah.
Great. Do all of that on the develop branch. But over here in the master branch, let's cut a hotfix, fix the bug, and then immediately ship it, rather than having to wait for all the things that Manfred's breaking on the develop branch. So it's absolutely not continuous deployment. And I wouldn't use GitFlow on something that is continuously deployed. So something like the community repository, something like Chocolatey community repository, we don't use GitFlow there. We've got a single master branch. We do a bunch of work, and then we say, oh, we're good to go with that. Right, let's ship it into the master branch and then publish it.
Yes.
GitFlow is not there, right? Something like a Chocolatey packages repository that you're maintaining for your Chocolatey packages. GitFlow, that doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
Most likely what you're doing, I'm not going to say this is what you're doing, but most likely what you're doing is you commit directly to the master branch, because that's just what makes sense. You make a change, you working on it individually. Someone might contribute a PR to your repository, but ultimately that's going in the master branch as well. Not a problem with that. That makes absolute sense. But something like this, where we are working on potentially multiple streams of Chocolatey, in my head, GitFlow makes sense. But day to day, when you're approaching this repository, it is just GitHub Flow. You're creating a branch, you're doing the work, and you're targeting the develop. But again, if you're involved in the process and you know that the thing that you're working on is going out in an earlier release, like a hotfix branch, you might say to us, oh, you know what, Chocolatey team, I've found a bug. I think it needs to go out as a hotfix. We'll have a wee chat. Oh, David, spot on. That makes sense. Let me cut you a hotfix branch, and then you can target that as your PR. But that's really the only question that you would need to ask. Now, we might say, oh, no, that's definitely a bug, but it doesn't warrant a hotfix branch, because you know what? we're releasing the next version of Chocolatey next week. We'll just roll that bug into the next release that's coming out, not hotfix.
Yeah.
But that's when you get into the semantics of what is a semantic version. So to me, major, minor, patch. Patch is only for bug fixes. Beautiful. A minor, that can be both feature improvements and bugs. But it's a decision within the team that says it didn't warrant its own little hotfix, but we will put a bug out in the next minor release. And then the major is, well, all bets are off at that point. We're completely changing how things work. We're going to change it to be a 2.0 release at some point down the line because we've changed an underlying dependency, or we've broken some part of the API that is Chocolatey, and we would signal that to the users that we're shipping a 2.0 release at this point. But because then the benefit, one of the other benefits of GitFlow, and this is where it gets a little bit more complicated again, and bear with me a little bit, right? But if we said we're over here on the master branch, and we're currently let's imagine a scenario where we've got to a 1.3. That's terrible, right? Let's rub that out. Let's try that again. So we've got to a 1.3 release of Chocolatey, right? Now over here on our develop branch, we've done some work that ultimately breaks stuff, right? So it's our intention when we cut over here, we're going to get to a release 2.0.0, right? So when that makes its way into the master branch, things are broken, right? But then a security related fix comes along. And because this has not been decided, but this is just hypothetically, let's say that we as Chocolatey are going to support the current major version and the last one for security releases.
Yep.
Right? So for a security release, we would just come into our develop branch over here. We would make the fix, or if it's a bug fix or it's a security fix, we might do it as a hot fix. So we would cut hot fix, do the work, and then ship 2.0.1. But what about these folks down here on 1.3? We want to be able to ship that. So what we would do is once we tag the 2.0 release, we would cut another long-term branch from master over here. And this would be a support branch specifically for the 1.x releases. So from a maintenance perspective, we would then take the security fix that was done here, and we would also merge it down into the support branch. So then down here on the support branch, we can then do a 1.3.1 release because it's a security related fix that we're saying we're going to backport. But
so
again,
would that be a real merge, or would that be just reapplying the same logical change?
Most likely it would be cherry picking. Yeah, it would be cherry picking the commits from
Yeah.
up here down to the support branch in order to create the 1.3.1 release. So it might not be a true merge because yes, at that point, it can't be a true merge because then that would include the breaking changes that we put in.
Yeah.
But the GitFlow branching strategy allows for us to take that support branch over here to then cherry pick the necessary security fixes, backport them into the 1.x support branch, and then continue that one forward. So in that scenario, we've added some more additional complexity, but it's additional complexity that allows us to keep that release strategy available to us. But then at some point, we'll get up here and we'll get a 3.0 release because we've moved forward again. At that point, most likely the support branch for 1.x goes away because we won't support two major versions back, most likely. But what we will do is we'll cut another 2.x support branch to then allow backporting of security related fixes to the 2.x, and that would come from from here, where we tagged the 2.0.0.
Okay.
So yeah, I totally agree that it adds some complexity, but with a small amount of process, and whether that's through issue triage or discussions, then when you break it down to the thing that you're working on, it's just GitHub Flow. You working in isolation, and you have a preemptive knowledge of, oh, that work's going out with the next version of Chocolatey. I'm just going to target develop. Oh, this is a critical bug. We need to ship that as a hotfix branch. Have a discussion with the team. We would cut that hotfix branch. You do the work, target it there, or we or you would retarget a PR to the hotfix branch because we know that we want to ship it as part of that. But really, it's just GitHub Flow when you break it down to the constituent parts, right? So what I was going to show is, if I bring this over here, and then I'm going to show you the original blog post from the dude who made it. I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to share this one. And I can put this link in the chat as well so that you have it. So let's put this in here. So this is the original dude, Vincent Driesen, that did it. So this is the complicated one. So this is including the feature branches, the develop branch. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that we can see it. Right. So this is encompassing everything. There's the feature branches that I spoke about, the develop branch, the release branches, the hotfix branches, the master branches. And like I say, when he did a release branch in this original blog post, that's the question that you asked. He would then take that release branch and merge it to both develop and master. But if you read up on it, that changed slightly, where you would then take the master and merge it back to develop. But if you, the thing I wanted to point out, if you come down here, when he starts talking about feature branches, that diagram there, that's GitHub Flow.
Yep.
When he talks about release branches, he maybe doesn't have a picture for it. Hotfix branch, master, hotfix, do some work, boom. It's just GitHub Flow. You've got the additional overhead of the additional branches, but when you break it down and you know where you're targeting something, it's really just the exact same process that you follow on something that's you're using straight up GitHub Flow with continuous deployment.
So I'm just wondering, would it be, so I think we've both got some PRs, but there's one I've had sitting there for a while.
On Chocolatey Choco or?
On the Chocolatey Azure DevOps repo.
That's in community, right? So let's
yeah. I think Quincy's got one as well.
Azure DevOps. So at the minute, yeah, so this one is running develop and master. So this one would be targeting this one. Yeah. This one is utilizing GitFlow as well. So the PRs that are up just now are, let's look at your one, David.
Yeah.
So this one is currently targeting develop. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So this is now we're starting to get in the process a little bit. So there's an issue associated with this. So if we look at the issue, then in my head, well, let's go back over here a second. Let's get started where we're at. So these are the releases that we have. So currently we are at 0.3.2.
Yep.
Right. So what needs to happen in my head to be able to continue this, we as a team, community team, would need to decide, is this something that goes out as a hotfix, or is this something that just gets rolled up into the next release? If it's a bug and we want to fix it immediately, then in my head, what we would need to do is we would need to create a 1.3.3 milestone, which is the next hotfix release. If it's not a bug fix release and we want to ship it as the next release, then we would create a 0.4.0 milestone. And then the PR that you have for a 0.40 target and develop is the exact right place to do that.
Right.
If we're doing a bug fix and we agree as a team that we need to ship this immediately, then we would cut a hotfix branch for 0.3.3 and then retarget this PR at that one and then ship it out as that release. Right. So that's, we're starting to talk about the back end process or the managerial process associated with it. And so for us, Chocolatey Choco, that's where Paul steps in. So Paul says as the team manager, right, this is how much time you've got to work on some bug fixes or some feature branches. Let's go some issue triage, storyboarding, all that sort of stuff. How long do you think this will take to fix, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Build up the milestone and ship it. For something like Azure DevOps, we don't have that we don't necessarily have all of that requirement, because we're just working together as a community. We can decide on ourselves what we can do in a specific release. So the question remains, is this a bug fix that's going out by itself? If it's yes, fine. If it's something that we can roll up with maybe the thing that Wency's been working on, then we would potentially put these two things together and put them into the 040 release, and then we would ship that. But again, that's what we're stepping into now, is the managerial side of GitFlow, because GitFlow by itself is just a Git branching strategy. It's not going to solve the world hunger. It's literally, it's just, we've got 2 branches, and from those branches we do some releases, which is the master branch, and then we progress work forward, right?
Yeah.
But the back end stuff, and maybe more specifically, the front end user facing side, we would need to decide, when's this going out? Is it a bug fix or is it the next release? And then we can decide how we target these things.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if I did need to retarget it, then I'd need to recreate the PR. I don't think. Or can you do that?
That's where Git comes in. So let me go bring this over. I'm going to Control C that. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Let me zoom in a little bit. Let me clear my screen. Let me make it a bit bigger. Let me go to the right repository. Give me 1 second. So we are in GitHub. So CD, organizations, Chocolatey community, and then I don't have the Azure DevOps one, so let me do that. So git clone. Where is it? Let me grab that. I'll put it on the screen in a second once I've got things in the right place. So paste that into there. Uh, 13. And then CD into there, and then do a git remote add upstream. That one. Git fetch upstream. Git rebase upstream master. I don't normally talk to myself when I'm doing things like this. Bear with me. Develop. Git push origin. Beautiful. Okay, so right, let me share this screen now. So where's my share? Stop share. Share. Where's iTerm? There. Sorry, this one. Right, you see this okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
So right now, I'm in the Azure DevOps develop branch, right? And if we do a GHPR list here, we'll see both your PR and Wency's PR.
Yep.
Right? So we know that this PR is currently targeting the develop branch. And we would say potentially that's not right. Okay. So let's imagine the scenario that we in the team have decided, right, we need to do a hotfix release. So we would do a git checkout master. We would spell checkout properly, right? We would do this so that we can ignore this part. Master, right? So I'm on my master branch now, and I would do a git checkout -b hotfix 0.3.0, and we're going to do that from the master branch. Okay, so now I've cut that hotfix branch, and because we need that to be available for your PR, we would push that to upstream. Now I'm going to do this, but I'll probably delete it later. I'm not saying that we're doing this. I'm just using this as an example, right? So we've now got that hotfix branch, but we want to take the stuff that you've currently got targeting develop and move it over to that hotfix branch, right? So if we were to do a GHPR checkout and then your PR, which is 65, right? That's me now got your PR branch locally on my machine, right? And I've moved on to that one. So what you can do, you're familiar with rebase?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can say git rebase -- onto is a command, a flag that you can use. And you can say onto master everything that's not included in develop. So what in a twisted way, what that's saying is take this hotfix branch that is the second null fix, rebase it onto no, actually that's not where I wanted to put it. Sorry.
I was going to ask that.
Rebase it onto hotfix 0.3.0.
Yeah.
Everything that's not on the develop branch. So it's going to pick up all of the commits from your branch. It's going to discard all the things that are currently in develop. So in your scenario, I think you maybe only got one commit, and it's going to stick that onto the head of the hotfix branch instead. Right? So if I do that, that should be a no-op, because you've essentially picked up a commit from your PR branch, and I'm now sticking it onto the head of my local hotfix 030 branch. Then if I did that, I'm not going to do this because you never do a git push force. You never do it. You never should do it unless the little scenarios. If I were to do git push -f, that would push the changes that I just made to that second null fix to your fork, and it would update your PR.
Right. Okay.
But I'm not going to do that because that's a destructive operation on your fork, and I would only do that to a contributor's fork if I was then going to immediately merge it. Because if I did that operation, you would need to reset your hotfix branch to the new, not the hotfix branch. You would need to reset your PR branch locally, otherwise it's out of sync, right?
Yep.
So having then done that work, if I then stop the share and go back to over here on this one, we could then go to the PR, which was in here and then in this one, and then we could then edit this to then retarget the hotfix. Now, potentially that won't work just now because your PR is still target develop. So there might be, it might try and add 3 or 4 commits to the from the develop branch into the hotfix branch because we haven't done that local operation of the rebase onto. Right. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to click that big green button, even though it's appealing to click the big green button. I'm not going to do it yet because it might end up with having more commits going into that branch that I don't want. Right. So you absolutely can. Retarget and then use the existing PR. But the other way of doing obviously would be what you suggested, which would be for you to create another branch off of the newly created hotfix branch, cherry pick the PR onto that branch and then push and create a new PR. But you can absolutely update the existing PR and keep it all in sync. Yeah. So the rebase onto is a powerful operation. Obviously, it's a rebase operation, destructive, rewriting history, all that sort of good stuff that goes with it. Just keep it in mind when you're using it, but you absolutely can do it. Yes.
No, I've rebase a lot, but I haven't ever used onto. So
it's one that I learned through Chocolatey Choco because the previous process that Rob had, which when he had the stable and the master branch, it was the exact same thing because sometimes we would have folks target the master branch, but then we wanted to shift it over to the stable branch. So it's actually documented in the Chocolatey Choco. So there's more information. If you go back, that's not my word to go. If you do, I can't type and speak at the same time, obviously. So if we go down in here and look at the contributing and search for onto, or is it committing? Sorry, committers. That's the committers. If I search in here, then it's documented in here. So pull request targeting. It goes through the process that I've done there effectively and says you would rebase onto the hotfix for everything that's in the develop, etc., etc., etc. So there's words there that kind of gives you some more information. let me grab that and put this in the chat as well so that we have it.
Yep.
That make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So again, we can take this offline, but I think specifically for the Azure DevOps one, which I think we do need to get a release out, we would need to decide, are we going to do a 033 with the one specific pull request? Absolutely fine. Or are we going to roll up the 2 fixes, one of which is the handling of the installation location and this one, and roll it out as a 040? Or if these are both bugs, then let's just ship it as a 033 and get out the door. I think that this is a feature. So this is a change to existing functionality. So this one in my head would be this would be labeled as, or this should be labeled as a feature, which by definition of semantic versioning would necessitate that would go out in a 040. Whereas the other one, which is this one, this is a bug. So technically that would go out as a 033.
Yeah.
But we as a team could say, well, actually, we want to ship that new feature. Let's just roll the bug into the 040 and ship them both in the 040. So if I were doing this, that's how I would do it. And if we're in agreement, then I could retarget this one to the 040, and then we work towards a 040 release and get a new Azure DevOps extension shipped.
Yep.
Now, the only slight complication, specifically with the Azure DevOps one, is it's under my publisher, the Git13 publisher. I don't think you can change that publisher. Or I think you can, but you need to have a support email with the Azure DevOps team in order to get the publisher changed over to allow multiple people to publish to the. You can't easily change the publisher name, or you can't do it through the UI. You would have to get support involved.
Have we not got it automatically publishing from the build at the moment?
So we do, but I entirely suspect that the API key is out of date.
Okay, right.
So again, I would need to go and get that and stick it into the secrets of app there, because I don't think I could add you as a publisher to my extension. But if we if we got it changed so it was shipping under the Chocolatey community publisher, or I don't think we have a Chocolatey community publisher, but if we were to create a Chocolatey community publisher, then anyone in Chocolatey community in theory should be able to create the API key and get things shipped. Whereas right now there is a little bit of a bottleneck on me to get that API key updated, and I have to figure out where that API key is in order to get it updated. But I think I left myself some breadcrumbs because I went through this process when I did the 032 release. But yeah. So go back to GitFlow though.
Yep.
Any other questions on the GitFlow specifics side of things, or is that clearer in what we're doing and why we're doing it? Or is there any outstanding questions or concerns about it?
That helps. That helps me. I mean, Wency, have you got any questions?
I think it's pretty clear of how the GitFlow working.
Okay, good. Like I say, it's not something that we're going to roll out everywhere because it doesn't make sense everywhere. But anything that we've potentially got support related stuff, or we want the ability to ship and like a quick, I mean, this bug has been open since 2020, so it's not always a quick process, but the GitFlow strategy does allow for, oh, it's a bug, let's just ship it, where you've also got some stuff in the develop branch that's been progressed. So this is not an active repository in the sense it's got lots of bugs and features going into it. But again, having that structure there, if nothing else, means that it's consistent with Chocolatey Choco and potentially Box Starter. So there's some consistency there. So from a process side of things, we know, oh, this is a bug that's going out as a hotfix. Oh, this is a feature we're putting that in the next release. Or, oh, we've got a bug and a feature going out at the same time. Let's just roll them up into the same milestone and ship them. But it's the exact same process that we follow in Chocolatey Choco, in Chocolatey GUI, etc., etc., etc. So we get some consistency there, if nothing else. So hopefully this has sold you on GitFlow. Not saying you have to use it everywhere, but it is something I think we will be introducing where it makes sense on the Chocolatey and Chocolatey community repositories.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that does help.
Cool, perfect. We have 5 minutes left of the time that's allotted for this. So any other questions about anything else that we could field that just now? Because what I'll do is I'll stop the recording because I think we're finished the GitFlow discussion. So where's the stop record button? I'll stop the share here and I'll stop the recording.